Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. Well, LA District Number 4 is one of the most unusually shaped districts in Los Angeles. It's actually the heart of LA. From Koreatown, Mid-Wilshire, Sherman Oaks, Miracle Mile, it's a very eclectic, incredibly interesting council district, and the newest member of the LA Council, as well as the first woman to represent Council District 4, is here with us today. I'm delighted to have with me Nithya Raman. So wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me today.
All right, newest member, how's it gone? 6 months? You feeling comfortable in the chair? If you even get to sit in the chair or sit in the chair at home?
Well, we just recently started sitting in our chairs, and I would say it is a very, it's a big job, 250,000 residents in each council district in LA, just 15 council members representing this big, beautiful city. So I think it takes a little while to understand the workings of this city, but 6 months in, I really do feel like we've found our feet, we've found our rhythm, and I'm really excited to see what happens, especially as we're hopefully slowly emerging from this pandemic.
And actually, when I was looking at the map of Council District 4, I mean, it almost looks like the map of a country. And it has such an, but it's true, it has such an eclectic and interesting mix of personalities, if you want to put it that way. I mean, really unique environment to have to work with.
Absolutely unique, but also what a treat to be able to respond to so many different kinds of neighborhoods across Los Angeles, neighborhoods in the Valley that have a very different look and feel and neighborhood composition than those in central Los Angeles, where we have a lot of neighborhoods as well. In many ways, I feel like the person who represents this district has to deal with all the problems that Los Angeles has, and the responses that we have in our district have to grapple with that enormity as well. And so in a way, I think it's a really challenging district, but it's also a gift to be able to respond to so many different issues across Los Angeles.
Well, and one of the challenges, and it's definitely been top of mind and definitely been something that you are focusing on very sincerely, is homelessness. So where do things stand at this moment in time in District 4?
Well, District 4 didn't have the largest number of people experiencing homelessness among council districts in LA, but we have a lot. And we've been really hard at work trying to put together a systemic response to the issue. So when I came into office, we looked across the district, mapped every encampment, major and minor, made contact with every service provider providing outreach and housing services to encampments in the district, and made sure that we were, from our office, coordinating that outreach and ensuring that every major and minor encampment saw outreach workers on a weekly and sometimes multiple times a week, so that they could build those relationships of trust with outreach providers and to make sure that they were getting into housing, because that path into housing is long and requires that repeated contact. I'm really proud to say that in the time that I've been in office, we've housed at least 100 individuals who are experiencing homelessness in our district, which is about 10% of the people who are unsheltered and homeless in our district. Now, that is means that we have a long way to go, but it is also, I think, a big achievement for the time that we've been here so far.
Just getting the stats as to what you mentioned about who's where and what's happening and who's serving them and everything like that. I know that normally there is an annual count of what happens across the city, and that count, because of COVID, was postponed. But there was kind of an unofficial count that happened, and some interesting anecdotes, because you can't really, call them legal stats, but interesting anecdotes came out of that unofficial count.
Really surprising information. So I want to tell you a little bit more about what that count was. So basically, across neighborhoods, mostly in central Los Angeles, it was a big part of central LA, neighbors who were concerned about homelessness or who had been volunteering on the issue of homelessness got together when they realized LAHSA wasn't doing their annual count and said, we want to do a community count in just our neighborhood, just to know what happened to homelessness here. And I think a lot of people were very concerned, because looking around in the city, I think it feels to many people
it's blooming,
that it's gotten worse. And so across 83, I think they did it across 83 different little neighborhoods, and they used the exact same methodology that LAHSA's homeless count did. And what these results found for these particular neighborhoods where they did it was really surprising. So in most of those neighborhoods, they found that either homelessness stayed flat between the year before and this year, or that it had actually declined. And in Hollywood, it had declined by 12%. But they also found information that explains a little bit of that dissonance that we feel when we look around. Basically, they also found that the number of tents increased, that tents being used for storage and not for living also increased, that the size of tents increased. And so I think, to me, the data is both promising and presents some real challenges for us going forward. So if homelessness actually stayed flat or maybe even declined in some neighborhoods, that means that the strategies that we put forward to address homelessness during COVID worked. That were stronger eviction protections and tenant protections that tried to keep people in their housing. Those worked. That means that housing efforts that put people into hotel rooms or put people into tiny homes, those worked. But it also means that as we exit this period of COVID, as people are moving into neighborhoods, as businesses open back up again, we have to make sure that we're addressing some of the challenges with larger tents and making sure that people who are living in those tents find their path into safe and stable housing and are able to put some of the possessions that they've accumulated over time into accessible storage. And so I think it's both promising, but also presents some real challenges for us going forward.
Because appearances can be deceiving. I mean, obviously, you think don't judge a book by its cover, but we do see the tents, and we do see that they're large, and we do see that they seem to be all pervasive, et cetera.
Yeah.
But to your point about storage, you have actually proposed an alternate to these on-street tent storage areas
Yes.
that might actually exist if this, survey is accurate.
Right.
Storage units in city parking lots. How will that help? How will that work? I mean, I am someone who will consider this. How does it sound from your vantage point, and why is this going to be a positive thing and not just making it last longer and more complicated?
So for us, as we were housing the individuals that we housed over the past few months in our district, we learned some lessons. As we were doing things around achieving ADA compliance on particular streets, which we've done in specific parts of our district, we found that actually having access to an accessible storage option helped to make all of those processes better. So when we were offering rooms in a bridge home, which is the congregate shelter facilities that have been built across the entire city, people were resistant to go into that congregate shelter because they had so much stuff and because they couldn't take that stuff with them into the shelter. And so offering a storage facility in addition to offering that shared bed helped to erase some of those barriers and helped to actually ease the path into congregate shelter. When people were trying to do ADA compliance, make sidewalks passable at a time when tents had gotten a lot larger, the addition and availability of storage for individuals made that process not one that was conflict-oriented, not one that was traumatic for someone who was experiencing homelessness, but one where they felt like, okay, I can put my things away and I can take this big tent down. And I think that's what we're really trying to do. In those situations, I also want to talk about the fact that our city workers are our frontline workers in those situations. Our city workers from the Bureau of Sanitation are out there trying to get compliance, trying to make sure that people are able to stay safe even when they're experiencing homelessness, even as sidewalks can remain passable. And I feel like the offering of storage can actually make it easier for that worker to do their job. And I think that's really what we want to achieve here in LA. So even as we're moving people along the path into housing, which is really the only way to end homelessness.
So you're in your wish list, how would this work?
I think that we would, ideally we would have storage facilities across the district that were easily, across the city actually, that were easily accessible for people. That would enable people to go and access them when they needed things on a regular basis. Where people didn't have to worry when cleanups were happening or when ADA compliance was happening or when they were moving into shelter or housing, that they wouldn't be able to access their things anymore.
So container units in parking lots, would there be locks? Would there be security? Would there be light? How would that be
So there's
managed?
a couple of examples of how the city has done this. There's 2 lots. There's one in Echo Park, and there's a facility in Skid Row that has already provided storage. So that's one model that we could replicate across the city. We could also use models that have been tried in other cities. I know, for example, I believe it was the city of Seattle that used containers that were actually placed on medians and had a person who was manning it, an easy way to open it, and people were able to go inside and exit very easily and access what they needed. And so I think there's all kinds of innovative ways that you can think about this. I think the city of Denver tried storage lockers in public spaces. All of them have their strengths and their weaknesses, and I think what we have to do right now is to look to other cities that have done this, to learn from them, and to make sure that we're implementing it in the right way here in LA.
I don't even know if there's an answer to this question, but I've just been thinking so much about this because it is top of mind. I mean, obviously in your district and so many other districts across the city. And I think people at large have great intentions and really, really, really want things to work out in a humane and positive way. I don't think there's anybody that has a real heartfelt, calloused intent in this regard. But I'm always wondering, has anyone actually walked up and done a person-to-person, what is it that you want to your life to look like off the streets? What do you want, and what are you willing to do to make this happen? Instead of the outside coming in telling everyone what to do, is there an effort on the streets to just get to know and find out the one-on-one stories? How can we help you? What is it that you want? What are we doing that you don't want us to do? What is it that you're willing to do in partnership with us to make this road move towards a better life for you and for the entire city?
Thank you for that question. I think that question really speaks to why I talk about outreach so much, why I think outreach is such an essential component of how we move us towards actually ending homelessness in Los Angeles, because I think it is exactly that kind of one-on-one connection, exactly that kind of ability to ask an individual what they need and trying to match them with the resources that they need that will actually help us get out of this crisis. I think even when you're dealing with somebody who is experiencing mental illness or that is struggling with substance abuse, there are moments when those individuals want help. And if you have an outreach worker there at that moment, that's when you can get somebody into services. That's when you can get someone into housing. When you have someone who says, I really, really want to go inside, but I have my partner with me, and I've never been offered a facility where I can stay with my partner, that's when you can find them that location that will get them off the street. When you have someone who says, I would really love to go inside, but I have my support animal that I've had with me for years that has helped me through thick and thin, then the outreach worker can actually find a place where they can take that support animal with them. And I think that is the kind of fine-grained work that we absolutely need to be doing in order to address this crisis. So I think the more that we can invest in outreach, along with all of the other things that we need to do in order to address homelessness, the better we can do as a city.
Well, and it also means that there needs to be a coordinated, cooperative effort, because I would think that, you can be District 4, but that doesn't mean that someone isn't going to move into District 4 that wasn't in another district earlier, or is that what we've all seen what's happened down at the beach in Venice? I mean, things, there is a transient nature to all of this. So in order for that to work, there has to be a cooperative effort. How is all that going, especially now that maybe you can all be back together in a council chamber?
And I think this idea of having a coordinated effort, I think, is really essential to what will move us forward as a city. When the city has responded to homelessness in the past, what has happened in LA is that there's been 15 different approaches under 15 different council districts. And you're absolutely right. There are no walls between my district and another district, and especially with my district, with how weird and I border with so many other districts, and people move all the time across those borders. People sometimes move from one side of the street to the other, and it's two different districts on either side. And I think having that coordinated approach is absolutely essential. One of the things that we're doing right now is that we are partnering actively with Council District 2 in the Valley to actually take on some of the challenges related to encampments that are not just near those borders, but are actually on those borders exactly. And to say, what can we contribute from District 4, what can we contribute from District 2, and how can we really solve some of the challenges that we're facing as council districts together, and I'm hoping that we can do that not just with Council District 2, but with all of the council districts that we border. But I think more importantly, we need a citywide approach. We need to think about this issue as not just every council member doing their own thing, but really to have a process that we follow across the city to approach homelessness, to secure housing options across the entire city, to make sure that we are addressing places based on need, based on other kinds of factors that can help prioritize where we're intervening. All of this would be much more effective if we were able to do it at a citywide level and not at the level of the council district. And that kind of coordinated, thoughtful citywide approach, that's really something that we're pushing for from our office.
Well, and I do need to ask you, based on that citywide approach, there was, a vote taken, and you were one of 2 dissenting votes in regards to what was going to happen with specific areas that encampments needed to be removed from or moved from. Obviously, you have your reasons, but you also then need to work with the council on this broad range approach that you were very, clear and concise about. So, how do those 2 things work? Why did you choose to vote against, knowing full well that the majority of the council was feeling one way, and the mayor has since signed? And then how can you work with everybody after?
So I think the reason I voted against that particular ordinance, or the version of the ordinance that was being put forward at this moment, was exactly because of this 15 different approaches version. The way the ordinance is structured now, it's based on an action of an individual council member to identify areas or encampments for intervention. And to me, that's exactly the wrong approach. As I said earlier, we need to be thinking about how we prioritize as a city, not every council member for their own. And I felt that the structure of the law, which we passed with very, very little discussion, really reinforced what I think has been a really dysfunctional approach to homelessness, one that has been counterproductive in our city's ability to address it. And so for me, that vote was really a vote for I want better policies. I want more thoughtful policies, and I know we can have them here. I know all 15 of us can get together and talk about it and get it right. I did not feel that this version was it. Going forward, though, I think what our role is as a council office, what our role is as people who know a lot about this issue, whose office is staffed with people who have decades of expertise in homelessness, is to really work with the CAO, is to work with other council offices to make sure that our interventions through this law are being shaped in a way that does move us forward. And that's exactly what we've been doing. There are additional reports coming forward on how the law is going to be implemented, what kind of resources the city is going to be putting towards it. And we're working behind the scenes to make sure that that structure, those interventions really make sense for what we believe will work in Los Angeles.
So you're new to the council, but that's not the fact that you are new to very dramatic and overwhelming issues that are not just here in Los Angeles, but in the world. You spent several years in India. You, were really focused on taking looks at areas that may or may not be recognized to the rest of the world, with, in Delhi and Chennai. What did you see there in terms of social problems, people in poverty that you learn from, or that you realize that our problems are much more solvable, or that this is not something that we should be afraid of, but we should dig into? I mean, what did you learn there that you bring to the table?
Yeah, so I worked in Delhi and in Chennai for many years. I worked on urban poverty issues. So I've worked on urban poverty issues for almost my entire career. And so there is that linkage going from one place to the other. But I think there's also ways of thinking about these issues that I think I've brought from one context into another. One of the reasons that I worked in India in the way that I did, so I'm an urban planner by training, and a lot of the work that I did in India was about getting accurate data about slums, about informal settlements where there were no access to basic services like running water or toilets. And one of the reasons why I really pushed for accurate mapping, for community surveys, for tools that could identify those needs was because I knew that with better data, with visibility for those communities, that their needs could be taken into account by municipal governments there. In a way, that push to think about whose voices are not being heard or which data is not being considered really was the push behind me running for office in the first place. One of the reasons that I decided to run in this particular election here in Los Angeles, even though I'd never really thought about running for public office before, was because this was the first election where we had an overlap between our municipal elections and our federal elections. Mm-hmm. And so I knew there would be greater voter turnout this year, particularly because a lot of people were voting against Trump, coming into the polls and saying, I really want a new future for America. But it was also an opportunity to say, hey, renters don't always vote in local elections here in Los Angeles. And this is a city that's majority renters. People who are facing housing insecurity often don't vote in Los Angeles. Lower income residents often don't vote in Los Angeles. Younger people often don't vote in Los Angeles. But we knew that all of those people would be likely to be at the polls this time. And so this was an opportunity to go out there and say, make your voices heard and vote for someone who hopefully will be speaking to your interests as much as to the interests of all residents in this district. And I think that that's exactly what this election showed, and I think that's exactly the shape that our work has taken in office as well.
You bring up an interesting point about renters being the primary residents of Los Angeles. And then, of course, one of the big things that, of course, makes me think after that is affordable housing, and that's one of your focuses as well. And as we were sitting here talking, there is a push in Pasadena for an opportunity for more affordable housing. And churches want to be able to rezone themselves to be able to build affordable housing. But of course, that has to go through all of its machinations before that's even humanly possible. So where are you in your district with affordable housing, and what are the options with maybe private-public partnerships?
So we're doing two kinds of things in the push for affordable housing in our district. One is that we're looking at the city as a whole and looking at some of the opportunities that we have to make it easier through our zoning code and through the permitting process for affordable housing, to make it easier, faster, and cheaper to build exactly this kind of housing, and to make it possible in more parts of the city, including our district, to build more units that are affordable, that are deed-restricted affordable. And so we've been doing that through our interventions in both the community plans that are under our purview, as well as through motions that have asked the city planning department, as well as HCID, to look at how we can make these processes better. The second is just in the district alone, and one thing that we've done is to review all of the city-owned lots and the city-owned properties to say, are there missed opportunities for city-owned parking lots or underutilized lots where we could actually propose either 100% affordable housing or permanent supportive housing, which is housing that is specifically for people who have experienced chronic homelessness. And so we've identified so far 2 lots that we've submitted to the CAO for consideration and a feasibility study, and we're now in the process of speaking with the community around those lots to see what they want to see in those areas, and to make sure that whatever we build, if we build anything, is an asset to those neighborhoods. And I'm really excited to start that process. I know that the process is very long often to actually get these projects off the road, sure, but we're excited about getting the ball rolling already on them.
And what about some partnerships with some philanthropic or private organizations in order to work with the city? How is that an important part of all of this puzzle?
Well, so I think affordable housing is often built in partnership with a nonprofit affordable housing developer, and so we've already built relationships with a number of nonprofit developers who have done this work. Part of the work that we're doing in terms of the community building is, when it is safe again, because our visits, sure, have been postponed, but to take people who live around these plots to existing affordable housing and permanent supportive housing sites to see, hey, this is what it looks like, this is what it feels like, and to show them that it might look very different from what they're envisioning in their heads and maybe feeling some anxiety about. So that's one of the ways in which we're already partnering with people. The other way is in actually thinking about not just affordable housing, but also service provision, mm-hmm, and to work with churches, to work with nonprofits, to work with coalitions of residents, neighborhood councils, to say, hey, one of the big missing pieces is that a lot of places in our district don't have any place for folks who are experiencing homelessness or experiencing housing insecurity to go and get access to what they need. And so can we do a pop-up shower truck here? Can we do a place where people can go and talk to a case manager? Can we find a place where folks can access a hot meal, but also potentially check in on their paperwork and to see where they are in the process of getting housed? And I'm excited to say that we're in talks with a number of service providers and partners across the district to try and make those happen as well.
Well, along with the problems, the challenges, and the work, there are some really fun things that are part of your district. You have a lot of the tourist destinations too. So how are things, outside of the long haul issues? How are things in the district at large, and what are some of the other things that you're celebrating or working on?
Well, so one of the things I'm really excited about now is that people are having block parties again.
Yay.
People are having summer events again, and I'm hoping that we can keep doing those, especially the outdoor events. And so I've been really, really excited to be able to attend neighborhood block parties and tree giveaways at farmers markets and things that actually bring the community together now that it's actually safer to do that, especially outside. I'm also really excited that we do have a number of these really big tourist attractions, particularly in the mid-city area. We have both really big tourist attractions that are undergoing revamps or that are opening up anew, like the Academy Museum. We have LACMA, which is undergoing this big renovation. We also have, in that same location, the Purple Line coming in. And so we're going to see really big changes in that part of the city that are going to invite so many more people into it and that are really going to transform, I think, how those neighborhoods feel as, I think, really gateways into Los Angeles. And I'm really, really excited to be partnering with all of those big institutions and with Metro to say, let us build a future here in these neighborhoods that reduces the need for cars to be coming into it, that limits traffic, and that really enables people to access these spaces on foot, on train, and really thrive in those spaces.
All right, so my last question, 6 months in, a little over 6 months.
Yeah.
Is it what you expected, different than what you expected, more than what you expected, or as you expected?
I think because I came in during COVID, and because I came in during a very unique time in Los Angeles history, the mayor just announced that he's taking another job even before his term is up. I think that this moment is a really special one in LA, and I don't think I don't think I could have envisioned what it would be like. But I will say that I turned 40 last week on Wednesday, and
well, happy birthday, and congratulations on admitting it.
Thank you. And I will say that I woke up in the morning and really felt so humbled and privileged to be doing this work at this time, because there is really no greater privilege than being able to serve Los Angeles and to be able to serve my constituents in this way. There's nothing better.
Wow. Fascinating. And if people want to get more information about what you're doing and let their voice be heard, whether they live inside or outside Council District 4, or what things are happening, how can they get in touch?
You can follow us on social media. We have accounts for both the district, and I also maintain a pretty active social media presence, so you can follow me on any of those accounts. And we have our website, which is councildistrict4.lacity.org, where you can get linked up to all of those accounts as well.
All right. Well, best of all things. It's not an easy road, but you seem to be very motivated to walk it, so congratulations.
Thank you so much, and
All right.
Thank you again for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks. And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.